You're now listening to the Bryan Callen Show, rated the #1 podcast of all time.
Of all time. Make sure you're ready, because this is the podcast where you are guaranteed to learn virtually everything. Today's show is sponsored by Audible. Go to audiblepodcast.com/BCS, stands for Bryan Callen Show, and get your free download. I am a huge fan of Audible. I drive a lot, and most of us don't have time to read, so I use it constantly. And I'll tell you what's on my phone right now. John Irving's A Widow for 1 Year. He was my wrestling coach for a little while. He's a great American author. And So Damn Much Money, which I've been talking about, which kind of like is all about how much money there is in politics and what a disaster it is, by Robert G. Kaiser. And you've heard me talk about this before, but a very important book and an amazing book called Republic Lost by Lawrence Lessig. I can't recommend it highly enough. It gets to the root of the problem that our republic faces. So once again, go to audiblepodcast.com/BCS to get your free download. And by the way, I will be doing stand-up comedy in Fort Lauderdale, ladies and gentlemen, at the Fort Lauderdale Improv, June 20th, the 21st, not the 22nd, not Saturday, but I will be doing it on the 23rd, Sunday. How's that sound, kids? Let's jump to July. Bryan, where are you going to be in July? We miss you. Well, kids, I'll be at the Chicago Improv, which is actually in Schaumburg, Chicago, July 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. Wonder if it'll be hot in Chicago. Oh, no. All right, man. Let's get this show started, shall we? All right, this is the Bryan Callen Show, and I'm very excited because I have Elliot Hulse on the phone here, and he is calling us. I think you're in St. Petersburg, Florida, right, Elliot?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from his gym, where he trains high school and college and sometimes pro athletes to be, better than they can be. So, but I guess the reason I wanted to have you on, my friend, is less about the fact that you are an expert in all things physical strength, but we'll get into that. But I was so fascinated. I started listening to your YouTube videos and just watching them. And by the way, if for any of you guys want to know anything about strength, anything about recovery, and 1,000 other topics, just type in Elliot Hulse, Hulse, Elliot Hulse into YouTube. And I got to tell you, man, I know you've been doing videos now since 2007, and it really is sort of a treasure trove of knowledge. I mean, I always think of myself as knowing a lot about fitness or, just nutrition and stuff. There's something about the way you present things, but I want to start with what really captured my imagination, and one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the podcast. And that was that you were talking to a guy named, I can't remember his name. He was going into the military, and and he said, I'm worried about, I'm strong and I'm fit, and I'm just worried about my mental toughness. And one of the things you said that I have always talked to other people about, but not in as clear terms as you did, was mental toughness is by far something, it's a question of letting go and shutting your brain off to stories, real or imagined, about who and what you are, and just being in the moment. And I want to maybe just kind of maybe we can start with that as a topic, because it feels like in some ways that's almost the whole deal when it comes to trying to accomplish something.
Yeah, there's such confusion about sexuality in our culture. And I say sexuality, it might seem strange that I would bring that up, but there are two animating forces in our lives, personally and in the universe. And, if you go to the East, they call it like the yin-yang, and you see like half of it's black, half of it's white. There's a little bit of white in the black. And that contrast displays itself in all areas of our life. When it comes to being a man, right, because really that's what the question came down to with our friend was, I'm a tough guy, but I'm going to show up somewhere where there's even a tougher guy, and he's going to be spitting and screaming in my face. How do I man up and handle that? And what I asked him to do essentially was to become more female, right? Because basically I asked him to yield. And that is to be tough, to be really tough, to be really strong, you got to also be able to yield. You've also got to be able to be soft. Because how many really, really tough guys are listening right now, and they're like, no, fuck that. There's no way. I'm not submitting to anyone or anything. Well, it's your fear that's not allowing you to do just that. So I would say that someone who has the capacity to be a little bit more feminine is actually stronger of a man than someone who is way too overly masculine.
And as you get older, you realize in some ways this notion of what tough is so compartmentalized. I always use the example of some guys can fight anybody in 6 guys in a bar, but they can't quit a job they hate. They can't get out of a relationship that's not fulfilling, et cetera, et cetera. So fear, courage are umbrella terms that are very relative depending on where you are. But I guess what I love about what you're talking about is you can step out of that equation. There is great strength in surrender. And I love the way you couch it in male-female terms because you're right. I mean, that is what so many, and we have a culture that prides aggression, that sort of, esteems the notion that you're a brick wall and just batter through. And there is a place for that in life. But certainly, I don't think you can get to the next level in anything you endeavor at without having more of that yin energy, if you will, or more of that female energy, right? You've got to just embrace it.
Oh, in absolutely every regard. If you're talking in terms of training, working out, or anything physical, you got to understand that your nervous system, what you would call your autonomic nervous system, part of your nervous system that does all the shit without you having to think about it, like beating your heart and digesting your food, is broken down in the same particular way. There's those two halves again. It's funny how those two halves just keep showing up, that contrast. You've got your sympathetic branch of your nervous system, and you've got your parasympathetic branch of that nervous system. And the sympathetic branch is that one that's adrenaline, that's go, harder, faster, stronger, hotter, more aggressive, more male. And you could just imagine, look at the world we live in. Everybody is going harder, bigger, faster, more, and at the same time, there's more and more disease and sickness, dysfunction, depression. And it's because we don't allow, and this is language that is going to be a bit more grounded for most of the people listening, especially if you're into fitness and exercise. We don't allow the anabolic branch of that deal to happen. Feminine, yin, soft, yielding, resting, digesting is all more anabolic. So because we don't use our bodies and live our lives in a way that stimulates more growth hormone, testosterone, all of the things that build you up, which are a byproduct of letting go, we end up having to use we have to end up using synthetic steroids. So all the drugs and all the disease that we're experiencing, a lot of it is due to this imbalance between sympathetic and parasympathetic, or too much yang, too much male, too much aggression, and not enough softness.
And when did you, this is an example of how knowledgeable you are and just how you have a really good way of sort of describing the issue at hand. But what was the seminal moment when you sort of came to this? Because you're a big, strong guy who played football on a high level. You walk into a gym and you're the automatic alpha male. I mean, you're deadlifting more than most people and all that stuff. But when did you? So your life has been, around steel. You're around a lot of, there's a lot of hyper sort of masculine, hyper aggressive energy in the air. But when was it? What happened? How did you learn this? What was the moment? What did you read? Were you exposed to a teacher who taught you this? What was it?
Well, here's the thing. It's easy for me to sit here and say that we need to balance our lifestyles balance the way we approach everything in life. But the fact is, if you're anything like me, you've got to actually like hurt yourself first before any of this shit makes any sense. And
yes, it's so true, man. It's so true. You got to fail hard, and then you got to go, what the hell's wrong with me? I think most change comes from some form of crisis. I mean, right? I mean, you know, when you just look up and you go, man, this shit isn't working. I'm kind of fucked here, and I don't know where to go. And that's those moments. That's why those moments are so important to carry through. You've got to just recognize those plateaus and recognize those dips and understand it's a huge part of becoming successful, right? I mean...
Oh, not only, man, I crave it. Like, you want to have crisis. You want to have breakdown. You want bad shit to happen because it forces you to look at what you're doing. It forces you to adjust your behavior so that you can continue to grow stronger and move forward in life. But a lot of times, again, it's that fear. We are too scared to subject ourselves to potential failure, injury, hurt, and in that way, we never approach any real challenges in our lives.
Yeah, you don't. It takes shit to make a flower, man. I mean, that's that sort of. I'm paraphrasing the old Buddhist sort of saying. I mean, you just. It is. There is not a lot of great. The wolf at the door is luxury. It is comfort. You've got to stay a little bit uncomfortable, right? I mean, you even as a trainer, you have to continue to confuse someone's central nervous system so that they continue to grow. Am I right about that?
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. And the same applies to even the things that I talk about. Because, again, I don't ever want to position myself as the person you need to go to learn what to do. My invitation is always get out there and do something. Get out there and experience life because that's the only time that you put flesh on the words that I'm describing right now. That's when the word becomes flesh, when you actually do this shit. So I'm talking, and it's all abstract. It's all poetic. It all sounds nice. I might dazzle you with my ability to describe these things, but really the invitation is go do it.
Go do it. That's right, man. I mean, you can talk about fighting all day till you get in the ring and somebody's hitting you in the face. You're not going to learn how to fight. The only way to learn how to fight is to fight. That's the bottom line. And that's a metaphor for everything, man. You want to be, I'm a stand-up comic, man. You want to be a stand-up comic? I'm sorry, you got to perform. I'll see you in 10 years. I'll see you in 10 years. Everything takes that long. And I love, that's the other thing that I really kind of gleaned to when you were like, you're talking to some young dude who's asking you about steroids, and then he's asking you about this, and one guy wants to lose 100 pounds, and you're like, listen, man, you got to start thinking in terms of years. This is not a 10-day transformation. That is all bullshit. And anytime you see anything like that, it's always a lie. It is always a lie. Any lasting change has got to become habit. And it seems to me that you, from what I watch your videos, you are you're in a large way you have solidified a philosophy that you have moored yourself into. You have solidified not just a notion of physical philosophy, but a mental philosophy, which seems to make you such an effective coach and trainer. I mean, that's kind of what I was drawn to. You speak in these sort of, almost like, I don't know, but I feel like you've read a lot of Joseph Campbell and the thinkers that certainly influenced me as a young man. So as I hear you talk, I go, this dude is not just talking to your muscles, he's talking to the complete person. And how to approach success, over the long term.
Oh yeah, well, it takes one to know one. So obviously, yes, Joseph Campbell has been a big part, and I love his stuff. Alan Watts, also Ralph Waldo Emerson. I mean,
fantastic, yes. And you brought up A Man's Search for Meaning, which I thought was great too. You're obviously a well-read guy, and a lot of young men listen to this podcast. And I always tell them how important it is to read, to immerse yourself in the best that's been thought and said. That's so important, man, because whatever you think you've thought, somebody else has thought about it as well and on a deeper level. So,
absolutely. And why not learn from the masters? I mean, that's how we got here. As a race of human beings, we passed on stories. Of course, you're familiar with Joseph Campbell, so you know the power of myth. But we passed on wisdom. We passed on stories. We passed on the accumulation of experience from generation to generation. I think it's only been perhaps the last 100 years or so, definitely not any more than 2 generations, that we've abandoned the wisdom of our ancestors in so many ways, shapes, or forms.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's so that's right. We don't have. I actually think, Elliot, I don't think we have a culture that makes us feel good about ourselves. I really don't, man. Mm-hmm. I don't think we have. See, so many cultures. Even today, and I grew up all over the world, so I didn't move to this country until I was 14. But one of the things that you find, whether I was living in Pakistan or in India or Saudi Arabia or Lebanon or Greece, those cultures have been around for a very long time. And they come with their drawbacks, but they also come with benefits. And one of the benefits is that when you grow up in a certain culture, and with those and cultures are very resilient with strong lines. There is not a whole lot of confusion about what your role is as a man, as a woman, what your role is as you have example. There is a great deal of emphasis on tradition, and that's one of the reasons. Tradition and ritual is very important because it is a cornerstone and a guide. Now, you can step out of ritual. You can step out of whatever mythology has been imposed on you, and maybe you should. But certainly we pay a price for not having any kind of a cultural through line to guide us, I think. In this, I notice, I travel so much in this country, I notice how lost people are, especially young people. They're just not given any kind of a manual or a guide, save a religion like Christianity or Islam or Judaism or whatever. I mean, but those things seem to be a little bit too abstract for a lot of people, or there is no longer the infrastructure, the scaffolding to bring people through their lives with those kinds of ethos and myth, So
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we've done, amongst many other things, is as great as science has been with its ability to bring us the technology and for us to look at the world objectively, it has caused us to adopt a paradigm where we not only rightfully question everything, but we no longer retain the sense of poetry in anything. So we've got one end of the spectrum where scientists and the whole idea that the world is purely matter, right, which is fine because we're playing with that. That whole idea is just that. It's just an idea. It's something we're playing with. Yeah. There's nothing definitive because if you look at where they're reaching now in science, they're coming further and further back to where we were before, saying, look, we're not sure what this is. We can't pin it down. We can't name it. We think we have it, but then it disappears. It basically sounds and looks a lot like what the ancients were writing down when they described the creation of the world. The difference is now, so we've got that end of the spectrum.
You're
right?
talking, by the way, you're talking about quantum physics here. You're talking about the subatomic level of physics and string theory and stuff. Just for some people who might be a little confused, I think that's what you're touching on. The idea
Absolutely.
How laws on the quantum level sometimes are in the direct opposition to laws in the ether we live in. So there are at least two realities, 2 dimensions. But keep going. I'm sorry.
Right, yeah, absolutely, quantum physics. And you got to recognize that words are symbols. So they're using words to describe that which in many times is undescribable. So we've got that end of the spectrum, and that's a fun game to play with. Recognize it, look at it objectively. Anyway, and then we have the other end of the spectrum, where we've got the ancients and we've got the religions of old and the traditions associated with it. And here's where they messed up. They messed up because all those stories of talking snakes and burning bushes and things that literally do not make sense on the physical plane. Like, people don't die and then come back again. It just doesn't happen. You don't die and you're reborn, regardless. I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but it just doesn't happen. People don't walk on water. The problem is that we get too attached to the content of the story and not recognize the brilliance in the context of the story. What is that story trying to tell you?
The symbolism versus the reality, that which you can measure with a ruler, and then the symbolism of what it sort of, the inspiration behind the story.
Right, exactly. So you've got you go too far on either end of the spectrum, and they end up playing the same game of trying to be right and trying to prove what they're saying is as definitive. And you can't get to that. The whole thing is still a dance, and everybody's trying to get to the end of the dance instead of enjoying it.
Well, man, listen, that's you're talking now like the romantics. You're talking now like those that had a rebuttal to Darwin's notion of just science, the fact that we're just smart monkeys. I mean, this is where Ralph Waldo Emerson, this is where Henry David Thoreau and William James and Henry James, all these guys came about. This was their answer. Yes, we believe in science. And I think it was Henry James or William James, I'm not sure, who said, yes, perhaps we are. We started as protozoa and then became monkeys, hominids, and then we branched off into people. Yes, I give you that in your science. I suppose that's true. He said, but there was something about that monkey that inspired it to Greek. There was something in that monkey that inspired it to do things for beauty's sake, create the Acropolis, write Shakespeare, Beethoven, Mozart, and all the things that we stay alive for. Great art, beauty, form, symbolism. There was something that pushed that monkey to create all these things that in many ways a culture considers its cornerstone. That's he also said it's kind of like saying a human being, it's kind of like saying when you break a human being down to its just pure matter, as you're talking about, that which you can measure, just its scientific matter, and you give no room for the other, for that sort of intangible. It's like taking a guitar and bashing it into 60 pieces, throwing it to the ground and saying that's a guitar. It might be a guitar, but actually a guitar is that mysterious, strange box when touched right makes beautiful music. I like living in that universe. I prefer the mystery. I prefer the romance. And I think I was drawn so much to your videos because you clearly adhere to that school of thought.
I don't see how it could be any other way. To take one way or the other, to move too far in either direction, you miss out so much. Why not both? I don't know why there aren't more people that are arguing for both. It seems like you've got to choose a side and you've got to defend which one is right. But when you really boil it down to it, it begins at our conversation. The beginning of our conversation was about dualism. It was about feminine and masculine energy. It was about yin and yang. And if you look at even today, you and I are able to talk to each other through the technology of the digital age. What is the fucking digital age? It's a 0 and a 1. It's all symbolized by this contrast, this duality, this 0 and 1. You can't have all ones and no zeros and expect digital to work. You can't have all day and no night and expect lights to work. You can't have all aggression. You can't have all science. And you can't have all exactness and expect to enjoy, appreciate, and...
Yeah. You're talking about expect to be balanced. Expect to be balanced. I think balance is, a huge, a big word that we have to strive for. I think it's very, very important.
That's real balance. That's true balance right there.
Yeah. And Elliot, here's what I'm going to say, by the way, on the podcast. I can't believe you've not yet got your own show somewhere on a network. And I'm going to make a prediction now. I think it's going to happen for you. Somebody's going to see your videos, and somebody's going to do something about this because, you just the way you speak and just the things that you do touch on that duality, on the physical and the spiritual, if you will. I hate using that word, but in a way that seems to be what your strength is. What was your childhood like, man? How did you become somebody? How did you become such a searcher, and how did you get in a position where you actually change people's lives, which you clearly do?
It's funny. It started when I was in kindergarten, essentially. Since the time I went into the world, which I know when we start schools, when we go into the world, and we got to find our place, I began asking, because other people were asking, Elliot, what are you? You see, so I grew up in a mostly white suburb of New York City, and my parents were both immigrants from Belize. And Belize is a country where there was a lot of race mixing. So there were the natives, and then there were the Europeans. They came with their African slaves, and basically everybody was screwing everybody else. It was a big orgy.
And out comes Elliot Hulse, ladies and gentlemen, 250 pounds. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So here I come showing up at, a school where it's mostly white kids, and there are a couple black kids, and they know who they are, they know what they are, they know their place, and then I show up with big lips and blue eyes. And it's like, whoa.
Not a bad thing, man. Not a bad thing. I couldn't figure out what your race was either. I was like, this guy is the composite man over here, And on top of the fact that you were obviously a very gifted athlete. I mean, you played football. Did you play D1 ball?
I played 1AA at St. John's University in New York.
What position?
Funny, man. I went in as an undersized nose guard, and I won MVP. I was Rookie of the Year. I led the team in sacks. I was the fastest and strongest nose guard, but I was also about a foot too short for the position. I just happened to be able to play it because of my athleticism. I'm built like a running back,
right?
But in high school, I was never given the opportunity to play running back. So when I was in my junior year and all the running backs got injured, the logical thing and the right thing that my coaches did was take their freaking nose guard and give them the ball.
You are built like you look. It seems that you're built definitely as a halfback.
Yeah, so I ended up that season. I ended up leading the team in sacks and touchdowns. So
wow.
When someone plays, it's like, well, I just played football.
Yeah. And did you ever have aspirations to go pro?
It's funny. Let me backtrack just for a moment. Even when people ask me, what did I play in football, I just don't know. I never have a definitive answer for what I am or what I do. It's crazy.
I understand. I do understand that. I understand that. That's kind of what you're here for, though, man. And give us some. You mentioned Paul Chek as one of your biggest influences in teaching you how to eat, Elliot. And I think nutrition is a huge part of being healthy, and maybe the biggest part in some ways of just being a vital human being. Who are your gurus? Who are your nutritional gurus? Who should we be reading? What should we be eating?
Well, Paul was very interesting and definitely a big influence on me because he was the first person in fitness. So mind you, I grew up asking myself, what am I? So at like age 10, I'm reading philosophy books by Paulo May and trying to figure out Paulo May and trying to figure out who are you? Like man's search for meaning when you're 12 years old is a byproduct of not knowing who you are.
Right.
So I've got that going on, but I also had incredible athleticism growing up. And they just always happened to be a part of me, just a search for meaning as well as a search for building a bigger, stronger, faster body. And when I met Paul Chek for the first time, he was all about strength. It was all about how to balance your body physically, how to train your muscles, how to create correct muscle imbalances. And then one day, this is as far as I knew of him when I first started studying. One day, he gets up and he starts talking about God, and he starts talking about the universe, and he starts talking about how, and then he's like making contrasts between the moon and the sun and our autonomic nervous system. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy just blended my two worlds together. He took everything that I've been talking about, thinking about, as well as the thing I love more than anything, which is training the body. And he showed me how it's one and the same. Your body literally is your temple. So he sold me at that point.
Wow. And what do you, I know that you talk a little bit about eating for your metabolic type. I went out and promptly read that book. But what do you think all of us should be eating? Is there something all of us should be eating? Is there something we all are doing wrong for the most part? I mean, what are the things that you see most of your clients doing wrong? Most of America. Do you have a point of view on that or not? Or is it all over the map?
Nutritionally, the very first thing I see is people are dehydrated. People do not fucking drink water. I'm shocked at how many people, I mean, young athletes to adults who should know better, come to my gym and I look, we start talking about their nutrition, and it's like, okay, well, how much water do you drink? 85%, sometimes more. I don't drink water. Well, what the fuck do you drink? Well, I have some orange juice, some coffee in the morning, or that Gatorade and
amazing.
What do you call
just
these?
All sugar and caffeine, man.
Yeah, energy drinks. That's what most people. I had a Red Bull today. Okay, so but how much water did you drink? I don't really like water. That's usually the first one to start with. I don't want to fucking talk to you about organic food or metabolic type. I don't want to talk to you about anything. If you're dehydrated, because you're made up of water. We're big, very hairy sacks of water.
Yeah, a lot of people are not dehydrated, and a lot of people just don't sleep a lot. Those are the two biggest things that when I talk to people who really know their stuff, those are the two biggest issues.
Dude, if you're not sleeping and drinking water, then nothing else matters. I don't even want to talk to you about anything else,
Good. And what about is breakfast the most important meal of the day, or does it depend?
With nutrition, it's funny because you read metabolic typing, and we're all so very different. Basically, the philosophy is with regard, and this is why metabolic typing will never be a fad diet. It will never be something that everyone's going to want to appreciate and use, because it takes responsibility. And I don't mean responsibility in the way that we're typically taught, like you should and shall not do. It takes responsibility, meaning that you need to be able to respond to how your body is behaving based on the season, based on your stress level, based on your oxidative ability, So there are people, which you would call these people like slow oxidizers, that do well without breakfast. They just, they don't eat breakfast depending on their stress level, depending on their menstrual cycle, depending on the position of the moon. The situation is such that breakfast won't be that important. And then there are some people like myself, I'm a fast oxidizer, and it's like, if I don't eat breakfast, I'm going to be pretty pissed off. And I know it's not the best choice for me.
Right.
So the answer is it depends. And
I live in a town where you're either into paleo or you're a vegan, or I mean, it's just, there's no balance, man. There are just orthodoxies, and if you're a CrossFitter, then you're doing the zone or you're doing the paleo diet, and you're a fucking idiot otherwise. And if you're,
right.
You know what I mean, and then if you're on the other spectrum, you're a vegan because no other animal drinks the milk of another animal, and there's all these orthodoxies that you hear, man. And there's very little wiggle room. We take everything to a goddamn extreme in this country. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
No balance, no fucking balance. You're a dum-dum. You eat bread, you fucking idiot. It's all that stuff.
But again, it goes back to responsibility. Nobody wants to take responsibility. It's so much easier. I was just talking to this with one of my coaches here, because people really just want to be told what to do. Just do this. And the more specific you can be about what they are supposed to do and what they're supposed to think, the more comfortable they feel, because there's no need to think. There's no need to pay attention. There's no need to be aware. Just step in line and follow my rules.
Yeah,
and it's crazy.
There's no need to gauge and to be feeling yourself and be engaged with yourself in real time. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. And then you're absolutely right. And then we have to defend that, because to yield your responsibility, to give your responsibility over to someone else, is sort of an act of sacrifice. And then you're vulnerable when you do that, and other people recognize it if they're aware, and if you're aware, if you're consciously aware that you basically just gave over personal responsibility of your life to this idea or this person. So you become very defensive, and you have to protect that. And that's how the cults begin, because it's like, okay, well, now I've yielded responsibility to the paleo diet, right? And I don't have to think anymore, because if somebody asks me what I am a paleo eater. Yeah. And from henceforth, I have to make sure that that's defended, because it personally identifies me now, because I don't identify myself. I've allowed that idea to identify me.
That's right. There's a very interesting thing that human beings do. Maybe it's just this culture, I don't know, but people like to define themselves along very strong lines. And that's usually a mistake. I do think that you need to know what you're willing to fight for. I think that's how you define yourself to an extent. That's where a philosophy comes in. That's where principles come in. That's where morality and ethics come in. But people, I think you just hit it on the nose, and I've never really heard it put that way. You are allowing, I think you said, an idea or a thing that you have brought into your life to define you. Along very strong lines, and that's when you miss out on a whole bunch of other stuff. Elliot, give people who want to take responsibility, give me 3 books on nutrition. If you had just 3 books to recommend, what would they be?
The very first one would be Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston Price. And not because it's a diet book, but because it is probably the only and very last study of what our ancestors actually ate and the physical ramifications of what that is in contrast to what we eat today. Dr. Weston Price was a dentist back right, I think between the world wars, in the early 1920s or 30s. And he noticed all of a sudden, he was a dentist for many years before that. He's an old guy by then. He noticed that, all of a sudden, all my patients are coming in with either the adults were having rotten teeth, or the children were coming in with what at the time they called facial deformities. They didn't exist back then. Today we call it you need braces. But back then it was very rare, and it was starting to become more prevalent. He's like, man, I've never seen so many kids born with deformed faces, basically faces that have crowded teeth, shortened palates, and a need for reconstructive measures to straighten these teeth out. And he knew, he had a hunch that this had to do with the change in the way we started eating around that time. And he set out, so he had all the data to support that, and he was just like, okay, this is what's happening. He made an observation, and then he set out to travel the world like any wealthy doctor would do, to study what he called traditional societies untouched by white man's foods.
Okay.
And what he meant by that was foods of commerce, basically refined sugars and grains, mostly the denatured foods that basically make up most of what you see in the supermarket today, along with poor farming habits that have stripped a lot of our quote unquote natural foods of the minerals that were traditionally in them, that the way the Creator made them to be. So anyway, he went first to the Swiss Alps, and he studied a European tribe in the Laotian Valley. And these folks didn't really get to partake of the white man's foods because it was so deep in the mountains that their trucks with cookies and crackers and jellies and oils, hydrogenated oils, couldn't make it up there. So they had to suffice by eating what they grew, and the majority of their diet consisted of homegrown grains, like very hearty breads that they would actually worship.
Yep.
And butter.
Yep.
Lots and lots of butter, tons and tons of butter. And these people were not only beautiful, and none of them had any dental maladies. Their children's faces were structured beautifully, wide, sweeping palates. They were also happier people. And he did a lot of x-rays and shit, or just studied the bone structure of the head and how it affects the brain and shit like that. But anyway, he went on to study a few tribes in Africa. He went to Australia, studied the Aborigines. He came and studied some Native American tribes in the Seminoles in Florida, as well as Eskimos up in the Alaska. And he throughout these studies, he devised a set of principles, dietary principles, that he recognized completely objectively. It's just what he saw. There were certain dietary principles that were consistent with those tribes of people that were happy, healthy, strong, and free from many of the diseases and deformities that the civilized people had.
Right. Yeah, and okay, so that's another. I think Gary Taub in Good Calories, Bad Calories takes a look at indigenous cultures like that. The Sioux Indian, the Bantu Belt in Africa and stuff, who primarily eating, a lot of those people were just eating meat and were very healthy. I mean, the Inuit tribes in northern, like Alaska and those places, where they basically were living off the food that was available to them. Certain grasses didn't grow, like barley and wheat and things, so they had to live basically off of animal protein. But the way they did it, and the kinds of animals that they were eating provide them with all the sustenance they needed, But I love that. I love that the butter. We had Dave Asprey on who has a website called The Bulletproof Executive, and he talks about going to the Himalayas, and they basically would make a tea with the I think it was the Gurkhas or the Himalayan, whatever the tribe was up there. And they would take yak butter and put it into make a tea with yak butter and barley, and it sustained them pretty much all day long. So it's stuff like that is just fascinating to me. So we got Weston Price. Yeah. We got Weston Price. Who's the next guy?
Well, to take what Weston Price discovered and just move a little further into breaking it down scientifically, there's a really good book called Biochemical Individuality. Again, it's not a diet book. It looks into the roots of what humans were designed to eat. And what he shows you in this book is that, well, Weston Price was correct, and the two main nutrients that Price discovered were available in all of the healthy diets were vitamin A and vitamin D. They're fat-soluble vitamins. So even tribes that would eat mostly plant-based diets, like 90% plant-based diets, they still went out of their way to find foods, typically from the sea, fish oil, fish livers, things of that nature, to eat and especially to give to their nursing, lactating women and children.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Because that's how people are being made, right? We're being made through the soil. The woman is the soil. The woman is the earth. And the man is the seed. We drop the seed in the earth. Now, if you can imagine, if that soil is depleted of vital nutrition for the plant, you wouldn't expect the plant to grow.
No.
But yet we're dropping to people all the time, and we're wondering, why our kids are weak and depressed at the age of 7.
Yeah. I mean, I also noticed how unhealthy a lot of women are because we live in a diet culture, this sort of notion of low-fat, high-carb, or high-fiber diet and stuff that there isn't a lot of scientific evidence for. And certainly women tend to eat, from what I've seen, less, not as nutritionally. It's hard to find nutritious food. We have an industry that caters to basically the corn lobby and sick chickens and grain-fed, corn-fed beef. Cows are ruminants; they should be eating grass, etc., etc., etc. It feels like the way we eat in this country is a form of madness, as civilized and as it's mass madness. I'm telling you, we are undernourished. We live on sugar and refined carbohydrates and packaged foods that you can sell well and easily because they've got 15 different ingredients in them. Look, Michael Pollan's done his work on this, so I'm not the guy, but yeah. So that book once again is Biochemical Engineering.
Individuality. I wish I could remember the author's name, but I don't have it here.
Okay. And third book.
And then finally, the one that you mentioned, which is metabolic typing, the metabolic typing diet. Again, these are not fun, sexy books with beautiful women on the covers and a step-by-step plan for you to follow. These are books that contain ideas that force you to be responsible about your diet. Most people are going to read these books and their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to fall asleep. But my invitation is always to take responsibility. And in responsibility, for you to be able to take responsibility in anything, you've got to have clear vision. You've got to be able to be aware of what's going on. And what these books do is they bring awareness to you. That way, even if you do make the wrong choices, I always say I'd much rather make the wrong choice knowingly than be ignorant and fooled into choosing.
Well, that's right. You want to see people. You want to read primary research. Hard, measurable science. Right? People who've done the work and looked at what's worked in the past. What are the? Having read all these things, what are the foods that you find all human beings tolerate well? What are the foods that all human beings tolerate well?
I couldn't tell you what every single person is going to tolerate well, simply because we're all so polluted and damaged. I mean, if your digestive system, if you're born with a genetic makeup that says that you should be able to digest, assimilate, utilize cow's milk really well, but when you're 4 years old and you get a cold and your mom gives you antibiotics, a huge dose of antibiotics that destroys all of your intestinal flora, now you're in a situation where your entire physiology has changed, and that which your DNA has been structured to allow is no longer the case. I know for myself, for example, that I grew up just like the rest of us eating, cereal and bread and like Wonder Bread and all that shit. And I was fine. I was cool until one day in college, I think I got really sick, and I took like some massive antibiotics, and all of a sudden I can't digest these foods anymore. I'm getting stomach aches, headaches, I'm farting all over the place. And I'm like, what's going on? And it dawned on me. It didn't dawn on me. Someone taught me. Someone gave me the idea that perhaps your digestive system has been compromised due to using antibiotics, and now you've become intolerant to certain foods.
Well, the advent, the advent of now science. It's really interesting to hear these scientists talk about the fact that they're going to start managing our bacteria, the bacteria in and on our bodies, the way you would manage an ecosystem, and that we are made up mostly, in fact, of bacteria, which was fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And when you throw that bacteria out of balance with antibiotics, sometimes you need antibiotics, obviously, but when you throw it out of balance, you'd better take measures to restore it somehow, because you can really throw yourself off for, and do really crazy damage. And one of the examples is in fact, destroying all the flora in your intestine. And they're not sure if your bacteria comes back the way it was when you take certain antibiotics.
Oh, you're never back. I mean, the term antibiotic is anti-life. It kills you. You can't literally kill parts of you and expect to come back the way it was before. Sure, you'll regain something, but it's not going to be the same.
Well, then again, if you have chlamydia or gonorrhea and you're in college and it burns when you pee, or syphilis, God forbid, take your antibiotics, damn it. Don't spread it.
Right, and that's why it's so tough to have a definitive answer for anything. Anybody who's a zealot, anybody who is totally convinced of any one particular idea, I think is a fool, because you've got these that'll say, never take antibiotics. Well, yeah, that's easy to say, and it's a very romantic idea, and you have all the backing, the proof to say that, yes, your idea is valid, but why don't you get gonorrhea and tell me what you're going to do? Are you going to rub some cream on it?
Yeah, good luck. Good luck. Good luck. Take some tea tree oil, brother. See how that works. It's so true, man. It's a complicated world. It really is, man. And I guess when you're training somebody, a lot of what you're doing is just you're kind of watching them and trying to figure them out, because everybody is their own puzzle.
I think the greatest gift that I can give my clients and the people that listen to me is the invitation to awareness. Just pay attention to what's happening in your body and happening in your mind. Don't take anything for granted. Just be aware.
Be aware, yeah. Which is being aware of not just your aggressive side, but your soft side as well. Nurture both.
Well, you'll know you're imbalanced. You see it, but you're going to feel bad. If you're imbalanced, you're. And the thing is, the next invitation, and it's the kind of, one and the same, is yes, be aware, but also respect and honor, appreciate what's happening in you. Trust your body. Right. So many times we go so far in one direction in such an unbalanced way, simply because we never listened to our body when it started talking to us.
That's interesting. Yeah, that they say that takes a long time. They say that people, you got to listen to your body. Eat when you're hungry. Eat what you crave. Sometimes it could be chocolate, could be meat, whatever. But any kind of religion, zealotry is going to run you into trouble, man.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's the worship of false idols, because your idea is just that. Ideas are abstract. Beliefs are abstract. They're just ideas. They're just words. They're just symbols. But we worship them, not realizing that it's our experience that is teaching us. So many people talk about, listening to God, and they think listening to God means reading books. Listening to God is not reading fucking books. Listening to God is feeling what's happening in your body so that you can respond appropriately.
Man, I can't believe you just used the idolatry as I talk about this all the time. You just said it. When worshiping false gods comes in so many different forms. It comes in so many different forms. And that we live in a culture that, when you've got a bone structure that cuts light well, people will look up to you even though you've never accomplished anything in your life. I'm not going to, there are a lot of obvious examples of that, Kim Kardashian and things like that. I'm just using her. I'm sure she's I've met her a couple of times. She seems like a nice person, but I'm using her as an extreme example of that sort of notion where a lot of young girls look up to her just because she is shiny. Because she represents something called glamour, whatever that is, and that is worshiping a false god. And you're absolutely right. God is that voice inside. See, I think most people. I think we all know the answer. I think for the most part, if you really stop and listen to that voice and take responsibility, like you said. We all know, most of the time, people know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and the rest is just procrastination. And man, does procrastination take on beautiful and wonderfully distracting forms, idols. It's very easy to convince yourself that you have to do this when you should be doing that. And all of us have that struggle all the time, man. And I'm always fascinated, Elliot, at how you've got to constantly remind yourself. You need reminders. And maybe reminders is another word for inspiration. But you need inspiration. You need reminders about what the straight and narrow is, what the path is, right? That by the way, which is one of the things I really appreciate about your videos. That seems to be what you are in a role of service. And you just put this information up there, and you've been doing it for a long time, and it's just so refreshing because you're just kind of giving it out to us. You just give it out. You just started doing it, and before you know it, people start paying attention, man. I don't know how I found you. I just kind of happened upon you by accident. And I see this jack motherfucker talking in these just, these bold strokes that sort of resonate. They're just resonating in my skull. And I'm telling you, man, we got to get you out there. You're not a Tony Robbins. We're not going to do that to you, but we got to get you out there somehow, man, because you've got a lot to say. You're a young man. I think, what are you, 33, 34 right now?
Yeah, 34.
What is you got a lot of life to live. What is your goal? What is it that you want to do? Are you doing what you want to do? Do you want to just continue to do this? What are your aspirations? Because it seems like you kind of arrived, but for whatever that means.
Taking this, doing what I'm doing. I'm in my river, and my only aspiration is to do it bigger and better. It's the same thing. Being a coach, growing stronger and inspiring others. That's it. I'm a coach. That's what I do. These ideas, they come across as poetic and philosophical, but really, to me, they really feel practical. They really feel pragmatic. They really feel like you can navigate your life based on this, and that's what I really aim to do, is not to talk about it. And that's why I answer questions in my videos. I don't stand up there with a chalkboard, or I don't pontificate. What I'm doing is showing you how this is practical philosophy. Okay, good, you've got a problem here. Here's an idea that will support you. I'm a coach. That's what I do.
Yeah, there's no question about it, man. You really do. Answering those questions, that's exactly right. You're not up there pontificating at all. The way you say it, I love. You go, I want to share a perspective with you, and you share a perspective, and that's exactly what it is, man. You are a breath of fresh air, my friend. You really are, and I hope if you come out to L.A. You come out and we can meet in person, or maybe I'll come down to St. Petersburg and you come out to a show and I can glean some of your knowledge in the gym and show you how I could deadlift over 220 pounds. We gotta work on that. I'm a weakling, brother. Come on, man. I'm built for dance. I'm not built for war the way you are. Come on. I'm very lithe.
That's cool, man. That's your biochemical individuality. Make the best of it.
There it is, baby. There it is. Elliot Hulse, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us, man. I really appreciate it. You're a special dude.
Oh, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for reaching out. It's quite an honor.
Look, man, I'm telling you right now, you can come out anytime you want. You can come on the show anytime you want. I just love having you. We could talk for hours. I know that. But I don't want to take too much of your time. But you have a standing invite, my friend. Standing invite.
Well, you're in trouble because I got your phone number now. So
listen,
it's gonna happen.
Please take advantage of that anytime, man. You are. There need to be more of you, my friend. Thanks for spreading your love and your knowledge.
You got it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Take care. That's Elliot Hulse. What a great guy, man. I love that dude. Go to his videos and stuff. And thanks, Elliot Hulse. That was fun. I like it. Bryan Callen Show. I'm out.
You've been listening to The Bryan Callen Show. Be sure to visit bryancallen.com for information about this episode as well as past and future episodes. You can follow Bryan on Twitter @Bryan Callen and like him on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Bryan Callen Comedy. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.